Ladies and gentlemen, we made it. The pseudo finale of the Pokemon retrospective is here, and man, what a long ride it's been. These videos have been some of the longest and hardest videos that I've made, but we'll save that for later, because I know exactly what you're here for. Let's take a look at Pokemon X and Y for the 3DS. Pokemon X and Y was revealed in early 2013 and I was hyped. I didn't have a 3DS at the time, but man did this game give me a reason to get one. Then all of a sudden Sonic the Hedgehog also found his way back into my life with the Wii U exclusive Sonic Lost World, a system that I also didn't own. It tore me up inside having to choose between Sonic and Pokemon. For me it was like picking your favourite child. Since the Wii U had more games I was interested in at the time, my sights were set on the Wii U, causing a massive Pokemon drought in my life. Then, as I got my Wii U for New Year's 2014, my eyes almost immediately went back to the 3DS and Pokemon. A few short months later and I got Pokemon Y along with the 3DS in April of that year for my birthday. And man, was my body more than ready. It had been over a year and a half since I last played this series, so I was going in with a relatively fresh mindset. At the time, Pokemon X and Y were received well by both fans and critics alike, and managed to sell millions of copies on launch weekend. Unfortunately, as time passes, it seems like a select group of fans are becoming more and more hostile towards X and Y, for reasons I'll discuss later. Needless to say, while I don't necessarily agree with a lot of these complaints thrown at X and Y, unlike Black and White before it, a lot of these criticisms I feel are perfectly justified. Without further ado, let's begin our Kalos adventure. The game begins in the way you'd expect it to. You're greeted by Professor Sycamore, who will ask you to confirm your gender. Only this time, there's a twist. We actually have some customizable options when it comes to our trainer's appearance. I'll talk about this later, but all I can say is it's about damn time. You're then woken up by a fletchling where you make a shocking discovery. You can now move in 8 directions. Seeing as how, as critics rightfully pointed out, this was the first 3D Pokemon game, unless you count these, you get dressed and walk out the door where you're introduced to 2 of your rivals, Shauna and Serena. They take you to meet Trevor and Tierno, who are just there I guess. I'm going to say up front that one of the main problems I have with X and Y in terms of its rival characters is that there's too many for me to give a damn about all of them. The only ones that you see frequently are Shauna and Serena, but even then I've seen better. Serena or Callum is a bit like Wally in Pokemon Emerald, as throughout the course of the game they'll begin to grow a high amount of respect for you. That's nice, but in terms of character growth I think Wally definitely has you beat there. You head over to Aquicord Town where you make yet another revelation. You can sit on chairs. Man, Game Freak sure are pulling out all the stops this time. When you meet up with your group they want to give you a nickname. You can choose between some pre-programmed ones or you can make one yourself. After that you can choose your starter Pokemon, the first being Chespin, a Pokemon that I haven't actually used myself, so I can't really give a fair judgment. However, looking at its stat total and moveset, I think you've got yourself a winner here. Its final form, Chestnut, excels in both attack and defense, making it a pretty reliable ally. In terms of type coverage, it's no slouch either with moves such as Hammer Arm and Roll Out through Level Up, in turn giving it a fighting chance with Ice and Flying types respectively. It also learns some really nice moves like Giga Impact and Wood Hammer. On top of that, it can be taught some really great TM moves like Earthquake to complement its above average attack stat. Next is Fennekin, the fire starter of this generation and my personal favourite starter, period. Yes, you did just hear me correctly. This is because I feel like there are far too many fans out there that are judging a book by its cover. As I stated in the last episode, I learned this lesson when I finally gave Oshawott a chance, who is practically the ugly duckling of the series for me. What starts as unappealing may become something magnificent in the end. To me, what matters most when playing a Pokemon game is its practicality in battle. That said, I love both Delphox's design and attacks. I may be the odd one out here, but I personally found the Fire Mage much cooler than the Ninja. Keep in mind that because I didn't have a 3DS, I didn't care for looking up any of the new Pokemon introduced in Kalos. The only real exposure I had with these guys is top 10s on YouTube. I heard lots about Froakie, bits and pieces about Chespin, and absolutely nothing about Fennekin, which made me curious. As soon as I saw its typing, Fire Psychic, I knew that that was a match made in heaven. FYI, Fire and Psychic are my favourite Pokemon types. I've got nothing against Greninja, but I do sometimes feel that he can reach Charizard levels of hype. That said, however, there is a reason why this guy is loved by so many, and after using one for my review playthrough, I'm beginning to see why. Greninja is a mixed attacker with an extraordinary speed stat, making it an ideal sweeper for any Kalos team. On top of that, it can learn moves like Substitute and Night Slash through level up, being a Water Dark type. That's not even counting the great moves it can learn through TM like U-Turn, Aerial Ace and Dark Pulse. One thing that kinda caught me off guard when doing research for this video is that if you breed Greninja with Omanyte, it can learn the move Toxic Spikes, an entry hazard that poisons the opponent when they get sent out in battle. This is a must-have move for all competitive players. But the thing that brings Greninja from a very good Pokemon to an uber territory Pokemon is its ability. Protein is an ability that changes the Pokemon's type to be identical to the move you're using. Meaning, not only will you always get same type attack bonuses, but you could also potentially fend off types that Greninja would otherwise be weak against. It doesn't surprise me that this ability was banned in the slightest. It's like Speed Boost Blaziken and Drizzle Politoed all over again. One thing that might become apparent to you when you enter the Santaloon Forest is the fact that things look awfully familiar, in that it's literally the same layout as Viridian Forest from Red and Blue. I'll touch upon this later, but it does link in with some of the criticisms thrown at this game. You then arrive in Santaloon City where you face off against the Bug-type gym leader Viola. Can I be perfectly upfront and say that I have no idea who these guys are from memory? Like, I get there's one or two gym leaders that you're gonna forget in each generation, but come on. I'm with the majority when I say the Kalos gym leaders are boring. I shit you not, when I was initially writing this, I mistook Olympia for Fantina from Generation 4. Heck, the only reason why I know who Clement is because he's a prominent part of the X and Y anime. The only one I liked was Gran, and that's only because I like the mountain climbing gimmick. In fact, let that speak for all the gyms in X and Y. Their visual flair and quirks give each of them a distinct personality, and it truly shows what the 3DS is capable of graphically. So why then are the gym leaders themselves so boring? I hate to be that old man sitting in the corner talking about they don't make gym leaders like they used to, but I've got nothing. Actually, I do want to highlight one of them in particular, not because I think they're interesting, but because a new type has been introduced. Valerie holds the Fairy type. Now, why the hell did it take them so long to introduce yet another new type? Well, to be perfectly honest, I've always thought prior to this game that the type chart was always balanced enough as it is. But hot damn did the Fairies even the playing field. Now, because of Kalos' limited Pokedex compared to some of the other games, an issue I'll touch upon later, older Pokemon like Gardevoir, Azumarill or Clefairy, go figure, were all given the Fairy type as either a replacement type or a dual typing. We've also got a few original Fairy types, such as the Flabébé line and my personal favourite, Sylveon, who is yet another evolution. This little guy just needs to be told no once in a while. Not only do these guys give poison types for more of a purpose, but they are completely immune to dragon type moves, as in, they can't touch them. If that doesn't sell you on this new type, then I don't know what will. At the very least, I recommend that you give Sylveon a try. This thing's Moonblast can wreck anybody's shit if you're not careful. Shortly after beating your first gym, you gain access to the rollerblades, which, can I just say, kick ass in almost every way possible. You activate them by using the 3DS circle pad as opposed to the arrow buttons. The best part is that they're decently fast, so much so that on my initial playthrough and for this review, I never actually picked up the bike because I thought it was unnecessary. With one gym badge under your belt, you set out for your next destination, which is the stunning Lumio City. This is the moment where it finally hit me. Pokemon had evolved, and for the better. No longer being subjected to just a bird's eye view, now we've got a massive open world to explore. It's magnificent, it's so grand, it's stupendous. Where the fuck do I go? All I see is grey. I'm having major Sonic 06 flashbacks here. There's that, and everything looks the fucking same. There's this part of the game we're supposed to go to the Los Andre Cafe. That in itself is like finding a needle in a haystack. But guess what? There are multiple cafes. Good luck! To be fair to the game for a second, this particular city is split into two halves, so they do limit your freedom of movement. Since Lumio City is practically one big shopping centre, I think it's high time I brought up another massive improvement to the series as a whole. Scattered throughout various cities are clothing stores where you can buy hats, t-shirts, bags and such for your trainer. You can change by either putting them on in the place you bought them at, or go to a Pokemon Center. You can go to a salon to get your hair cut, and at the start of the game you can even change your hair and skin color. I have wanted something like this in a Pokemon game for a very long time. It may not seem like much, but I think it is, as it gives you as a Pokemon trainer more of an identity. You're not just a small 10-year-old, you're you, and this is your adventure to call your own. I was very sad to see this feature did not return for Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. I know that was to stay tried and true to the originals, but it was still disappointing. Sun and Moon have since been confirmed to have trainer customization though, so I'm not going to lose sleep over it. In addition to this, X and Y also add quite a few small but handy features that series veterans will definitely appreciate. Online functionality has been significantly improved. You have an easy to navigate user interface that you can promptly access on the touchscreen at any time. Linking up with friends is as easy as having their 3DS friend code and seeing if they're online, so that means no more friend codes for individual games. A new feature of online comes in the form of Wonder Trade. Wonder Trade is basically a luck of the draw sort of deal. Two people offer completely random Pokemon to each other and you're not allowed to see what they're offering you. Two other features you can access on the touchscreen come in the form of Pokemon and Me and Super Training. Pokemon and Me allows you to pet your Pokemon like some sort of Nintendog and feed them Pokepuffs to increase their happiness. This is an excellent way to get happiness evolutions without too much hassle. Super Training on the other hand has the player bursting balloons. When you burst the balloon you'll be given a type of punching bag. Depending on your performance and your luck you may also score some rare items too. By destroying these balloons you can increase your Pokemon's EV stats, something I talked about in my Emerald review. If you're all about this sort of thing then this mode is just for you. You trek through Lumiose and eventually you'll meet face to face with Professor Sycamore. Wow, this is actually quite interesting, a professor actually challenging you to a battle, with his team being the classic Bulbasaur, Squirtle and Charmander. The real shock comes in after the battle when the kind professor offers to give you one of these Pokemon. Okay, that settles it, Professor Sycamore will always be my favourite. When you reach Shalor City you'll eventually find out why Game Freak were being so generous. Before we go on, I'd just like to talk a little bit about the EXP share. The EXP share in previous games was a hold item that you could give to your Pokemon so they would at least get half the experience every battle. This was especially handy when training Pokemon like Magikarp. In Generation 6, the EXP share has been promoted to a key item that you can turn off and on. If it's turned on, it means that regardless of who fought in the battle, every single one of your Pokemon will at least gain half the experience points. This can also make the game incredibly broken. Now on one side, this can help training up Pokemon in the post game much easier, and for that I applaud it. On the other hand, it makes the game's difficulty curve more like a difficulty roller coaster. It's clear that Game Freak wanted you to use it because if you do, you'll be evenly matched with the champion at the end of the game. And at times the levels between you and your opponent stay reasonably balanced. Key phrase there being at times. Other times you could be 10 levels ahead of the competition and wipe out anyone without any effort. And I'm aware that Pokemon has always been easy to begin with, but it gets to the point where this is kind of a joke. That's also the reason why I don't really find the gym leaders to be all that interesting, because I steamrolled right through them. You could argue that if you want a more quote-unquote purist Pokemon experience, then you can just turn it off. And to that I say, very true. However, with such inconsistent level balancing, I'm almost certain that Game Freak intended you to use it in the main game. And this isn't the only case where X and Y can become fairly broken. When you reach Shalor City, you'll eventually find out why Game Freak were being so generous with the Kanto starter earlier. After rematching your rival, you'll get your hands on what is known as the Mega Ring, the key to Mega Evolution. What is Mega Evolution? You'll find out by rematching the gym leader Corina, who will outright give you a decently leveled Lucario. Jesus man, what is it with all these free Pokemon? As I said, X and Y can get a bit too easy for my taste at times. In order to Mega Evolve, you'll need the corresponding Mega Stone. For example, in order to Mega Evolve Venusaur, you'll need the Venusaurite. There are 48 Mega Evolutions in total. You find the majority of Mega Stones in the post-game by searching in certain places in a specific time frame. That's if you're playing X and Y. Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire made it so that you can simply find Mega Stones lying on the ground. All you need to do is find these sparkly patches or complete certain side quests. These Mega Stones bring up another glaring issue that I have that I want to bring up ASAP. These forms make each new game more and more incompatible with each other. Let me explain. New Mega Evolutions were added into Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. Fantastic new toys to play with, except these new forms weren't in X and Y, so what do? Game Freak made it so that if one player wants to play with Oras, that's Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire for short, then they must not use the Mega Evolution forms exclusive to those games. I found this acceptable with examples such as Orange and Giratina from Platinum, but this is an integral part of the game. Game Freak could have and should have updated X and Y to include the new Megas. Now some of you may argue that the Megas are the selling point of Oras. Given all the content I went over in my Generation 3 review, I would beg to differ. This means that if you want to keep up with the competitive scene, you are outright forced to buy the new game. Granted, if you're a fan, you'll eventually buy it anyway, but money doesn't grow on trees. Come on Game Freak, I expected this sort of shit from EA, not you. I like Mega Evolutions on paper. As a great philosopher once said, with great power comes great responsibility. Mega Evolutions do three things: give said Pokemon a new visual flair and sometimes give them a new typing, give the Pokemon a new fantastic ability, and boost their base stat total by 100. Giving bad or mediocre Pokemon like Mawile, Sableye, Lopunny or Bayonet a chance to be good is absolutely fantastic, and in that case, Megas are a-okay with me. That said, I don't think Mega Evolutions are used that responsibly. Call me crazy, but I don't think a Pokemon like Alakazam really needs a boost in power. There is something terribly wrong when a hard-hitting Pokemon like Aggron is just as bulky as a Shuckle. Gengar has the ability Shadow Tag, which means you can't switch out. What makes this okay with Pokemon like Wobbuffet is that he's a high-risk, high-reward character, since he can only hurt the opponent by deflecting their moves. Gengar's special attack stat on the other hand is extremely high, with some great moves to boot, so this ability can get very broken very quickly. You could also say the same about Speed Boost Blaziken, who is now readily available thanks to the power of Mega Evolutions. Somebody please tell me why, just why, did Mewtwo get not one, but 2 Mega Evolutions? He was already uber enough as it is. He did not need a boost, nor did he need a boost on top of that boost. But I know what you're all rushing to say. Mega Evolutions are unable to hold items, which makes a massive impact on battle potential. Yes and no. While it is very true that hold items can indeed change the tide of battle, to say it nerfed the Megas is simply untrue. I've seen what these things can do, and I do know that they can sweep teams in the blink of an eye. Put it this way, why would you need a choice band or scarf when you can get the exact same enhancements from a Mega Evolution, with a cool ability to boot? Even if that was the case, there's still another Pokemon that sends shivers down my spine. He is the destroyer of worlds himself, Rayquaza. If you want my honest opinion, I absolutely love Rayquaza. He is the Mewtwo of my time. He's an awesome Pokemon with some badass appearances. Special mentions go to the Mystery Dungeon finale, and of course his descent from the heavens in Emerald. That said, who was the genius that thought it was a good idea to give this guy Mega Evolution without the need of a held item? Oh yeah, not only does he get a stat boost, but he can also use a held item to get stat boosts on top of that stat boost. While we're at it, why the hell can you do a Primal Reversion and a Mega Evolution in the exact same battle? For those who are unaware, you can only use one Mega per battle, which is supposed to balance this mechanic, which is very debatable. However, this does not apply to Primal Reversion. Primal Reversion is a technique exclusive to Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire. Through the use of the blue and red orbs respectively, you can revert Kyogre and Groudon back to how they looked many years ago. Essentially, instead of evolving, you're devolving, which ironically makes them stronger. Other than that, there's literally no difference between the two transformations. Sure, in tournaments this sort of stuff is banned anyway, no doubt, but when battling with friends, this could very easily make the fight one-sided. Megas are still something I'm very conflicted on. They have their appeal, but much like the XP share, they sure are broken. While we're in Lumio City, let's talk about the big bad of the game, Lysandre. Or is he? He's the leader of Team Flare, though you wouldn't think that at first, bar his hairstyle. Team Flare are utter scumbags, and I do mean flat out scumbags. This is not a Team Aqua, Magma, Plasma, to some extent Galactic situation, in where their intentions are pure, they're just being misguided by a lone individual. No. This time it's actually quite the opposite. Team Flare wants to eliminate anybody that isn't in their group, as they believe they're human perfection, and anybody that isn't on their level deserves to die. Lysandre is different though. He's fully aware that he's going down a very rocky road, and in some respects even resents what he's doing. So then why does he do the things he does? When you first meet him, he asks the actor and Kalos champion Diantha whether or not she worries about what will happen to her when she gets older. Diantha replies by saying that while her role in society may not be the same, she looks forward to the part she'll play in the future regardless. That's surprisingly deep for a Pokemon game, the acceptance of having to adapt as times change. However, that still doesn't explain what he's doing entirely. He states that because of various wars we as humans create, we end up destroying the beauty of the world and indeed harm the Pokemon along with it. To fix this, he wants to use the ultimate weapon, which is practically a gigantic planet engulfing fuck you laser. This will in turn eliminate the human race, with the sole exception being him and Team Flare. In theory, this should give a chance for Pokemon and what's left of humanity to start anew. The heartbreaking part about all this is that in his last ditch effort to stop you, the machine malfunctions and Lysander is left to die in the crumbled remains of Flare HQ. Alright, it's not stated directly that he's dead, but you can read between the lines. That is if you're playing Y. I heard in X it's a little bit different, but Y is the version I played, so there you go. That is such a damn shame, because I genuinely like Lysandre, not as a villain but as a person. He seems lost, even shedding a tear at the thought of what he's about to do. It's made very clear early on that he loves this world, and he sees his alignment with Team Flare as a necessary evil in order to protect what he holds so dear. There is so much you could take away from this, and I will personally leave that up to you. The weapon must have come from somewhere though, right? That's where the mysterious trainer AZ comes in. After being captured and imprisoned by Team Flare, the former king of Kalos tells you a story that happened long ago of a man and his Floette that loved each other very much. During this time there was a great war and the man's Pokemon was forced to take part in the conflict. Several years later the man was given a box. Inside the box is what's assumed to be the man's dead Floette. To bring this Pokemon back to life he built a machine, however his rage had not subsided. As a result he turned this machine into a weapon. This weapon caused so much destruction that it soon ended the Great War. Knowing how many lives had been taken just to restore its own, the Floette left the man and has never been seen since. This is also where you learn that the stones near Geosenge Town are actually there to commemorate the Pokemon that fell in this war. There's no sugarcoating this time. These Pokemon died, probably in brutal ways too. And you know what? I love this. Pokemon may be a children's franchise, but I'm glad it's finally starting to grow up with its audience. Never did I expect a Pokemon game to touch upon the how much is one life to save millions debate. And yes, the weapon he's talking about is the exact same weapon that Lysandre uses. In fact, Lysandre is actually AZ's younger brother. However, what I feel is the single most powerful moment in any main series Pokemon game is the post-Elite Four sequence. AZ challenges you to a battle for old time's sake. After the battle, much like Giovanni before him, he begins to see the joy of battling once more. Then and there a Floette floats down from the sky, revealing that the man AZ told us about was actually him the entire time. While I still think Black and White's story is better as an overall package, the highs in X and Y certainly hit much harder for me. And that's pretty much it for my story recap for X and Y. Bar these exceptions I mentioned, it's very by the numbers, and hey, there's nothing wrong with that. As long as there's enough to keep both kids and adults entertained, then I have no big complaints. I'm at least grateful that Game Freak didn't revert back to a minimalistic story after Black and White, and I hope they continue to expand on the lore in future games. Now, time to talk about the elephant in the room when it comes to this game, the Pokédex. The generations before this always added a minimum of 100. Generation 6 introduced 69 new Pokemon. 3 of those are event exclusive. Now, that's something that's always left me conflicted. You may have heard me say many times throughout these reviews that one thing I look for in a new Pokemon game is of course, new Pokemon. So naturally you'd expect me to hate the Kalos decks for a less than average head count. The answer is once again yes and no. Let us not forget that in every generation there's always been a handful of Pokemon that outright sucked. I'm talking about the Farfetches, the Sunfloras, the Love Discs, the Lumineons, the Love Discs again. You know, those Pokemon. Generation 6 on the other hand, I can't think of a single Pokemon that I'd consider terrible. Granted, I've only trained about 20 of them, but even then when it comes to the internet, most people have nothing but praise for the Kalos decks. One Pokemon that I took a great liking to was Hawlucha. Flying Press is both a fighting and flying type move, which I shouldn't need to say provides some amazing type coverage. Goodra lacks the brutality provided by Salamence and Hydreigon, but it's bulkier than any other dragon type I've ever seen. Keep in mind that just because I said this guy isn't as strong as most dragons, that doesn't mean it pulls any punches. Power Whip is a 120 power move with 85% accuracy, essentially it's a grass type fire blast. Gudra learns this move through level up, and my god, I've one-shotted plenty of Pokemon with it. Now, are you ready for what is the weirdest method of evolving a Pokemon? In order to evolve Inkay into Malamar, you have to level him up while holding your 3DS upside down. Remember those rumours you heard as a kid about how to get Peekaboo? This is Game Freak's take on that. I mean seriously, not only is this weird, but in my case I look like a twat while doing it. Back to the question I asked before I went on this long-winded rant. While I am disappointed that there are little new Pokemon, I wholeheartedly believe that Gen 6 has the greatest replay value of any game in the series. While the Kalos roster itself might be a bit on the small side, the entire Kalos dex on the other hand is anything but small. Out of all 720 Pokemon, Kalos has a grand total of 457 available for you to catch. That is quite a spread. Every single route you visit has 6 or 7 new encounters. In that case, the prospect of stepping foot into a new location is always an exciting endeavour. Generation 6 is often accused of nostalgia pandering, and to be fair, I get it, but I also understand why that's the case. Think of it like this: X and Y were the first main series 3D Pokemon games. You're extremely likely to rope in an older audience that remember playing Pokemon back in the days of Red and Blue. It's because of this that you don't want to alienate your fans by shoving all the newcomers in their face. If you want proof of this, just look at all the complaints thrown at the Pokémon tournament roster. 9 times out of 10 it's somebody complaining that there aren't enough iconic Pokemon, quote unquote. In which case I say cry me a fucking water gym. The Kanto starter, the throwback to Viridian Forest, and hell, even catching Mewtwo in the post game was very much an attempt to convince people that this is still the same Pokemon from way back when. Even the anime got on this at one point with the remix of the original theme song. All I'm saying is that given the install base of this game, it was a smart business decision on Game Freak's part. Besides, I know some other franchises that are much worse at pandering to nostalgia. I'm not going to name any names, but I'm not going to be subtle either. As for the presentation, you couldn't have asked for a better looking game. The Pokemon models are excellently crafted and could even match GameCube standards. For a handheld, that's damn impressive. The character models are fairly short and very expressive, giving them a sort of chibi feel. Not a fan of Kalos as a region though. Apart from Lumiose and Snowbell City, I can't really remember any of the major locations. Not a terrible region, just a very forgettable one. Can't say the same thing about the soundtrack though. This shit is good. In fact, I dare say it's my favourite soundtrack in the entire series. The opening theme where you meet Professor Sycamore fills me with excitement and the odd feeling of nostalgia as I anticipate starting my journey. I always love meeting back up with your friends, if not just to hear the merry little song that plays. Speaking of your friends, they leave you to go back home just before entering Snowbell City. The preceding song that plays really hits you where it hurts. It has this very sombre feeling to it, almost as if the game knows your journey is coming to an end. I do think the build up to the gym theme is a little long, but it's still good. I absolutely love the thunder you hear when you battle Xerneas and Yveltal. These are beings of life and death after all, so a grand entrance is in order. You get the point. I love this soundtrack, and I can't disagree with the people enough who say that the soundtrack is one of the worst in the series. There's one more thing I have to go over before we wrap things up. There is in fact a second reason why there's so many Pokemon available in this game. It's because, for a short while, you couldn't transfer your Pokemon from Generation 5. For the record, Gen 3, that's how you do it. You can move Pokemon between games by using Pokemon Transfer and Pokemon Bank. You don't need a second 3DS to do this, just put a Gen 5 game into the slot and transfer them over. The only catch being is that this is a service you have to pay for. Before you walk out on me, I'd just like to say that while I was against this idea at first, I quickly warmed up to it once I learned how much they were charging. A year's subscription to Pokemon Bank is literally the same price as a sandwich, so it's not like you're paying a hefty amount of cash for a subpar service that only works half the time. With this service now in place, it also fixes a problem I've had with the series for a very long time. You see, part of the joy that Pokemon brings me is the adventure, but you can only have one save file. It's either you spend all that time moving your Pokemon from one game to another, or you delete your save file and lose all your Pokemon. Now just transfer them to the Pokemon Bank and you won't have to worry about any of that. With all that said and done, that ends my review of Generation 6. I know this review was shorter than usual, but that's only because this is a very safe entry into the series. There's not really anything major to discuss other than the obvious graphical enhancements. Even then, this game for some reason to me has a certain charm that other games in the series don't have, and I've yet to discover why. I'll put my hands up and fully admit that I had a lot of fun with this game. It's my third favourite in the series behind Generation 3 and finally Generation 5. Initially I was going to end with a heart-to-heart talk about just how much this series means to me. But Game Freak quickly put a cork in that plan, so depending on when this video goes out, we'll pick this series back up again for the grand finale with the release of Pokemon Sun and Moon to commemorate Pokemon's 20th anniversary. In the meantime, I've got some cleanup to do. Thank you for watching, ladies and gentlemen, and have a great day.